Welcome to My Therapist is Out, an open space therapy collective podcast. We are your hub for queer and trans mental health care. Each episode, we talk with one of our open space therapists or LGBTQ community member about mental health and building community. And I am your host, Renae Johnson, they, them, licensed therapist and founder of Open Space Therapy Collective. OSTC was founded on providing excellent queer, trans, and QPOC-informed care for adults, teens, partners, and families. This week, we are talking with Terra Friedman, she, her. Terra is an associate therapist with Open Space Therapy Collective. Terra specializes in working with high-achieving women who experience anxiety and also works with couples and partners who are currently in or exploring non-monogamous relationships.
As we dive into today's topic, please keep in mind that this is a mental health podcast. We will talk about sensitive and difficult issues that are not appropriate for all audiences. Please take care while listening.
Hey, welcome back to My Therapist is Out. This week we're talking with our therapist, Terra Friedman, about how to have healthy open relationships. We've been talking a lot about relationships so far this season, and people coming into therapy and just the human experience is really informed by the relationships we have with other people, whether that's family or romantic partners or friends or colleagues or the neighbor across the street. And so we're really focusing there on some of these nuances. So this week we get into open relationships and how to do those in a healthy way. Terra is one of our relationship specialists at OSTC and really is able to insightfully talk through some of the hangups that she sees with clients and ways to work around that, ways to work past those barriers with your partners and the things that you need to do on your own so all of your relationships can be healthy. And one of the big things is about managing expectations, both for yourself and for your partner. So let's dive in. Let us know what you think. You can email us, message us below. Of course, reach out at any of the social medias, and we look forward to hearing what you think.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're so excited.
Keep going, keep going.
You've never seen that side of me. I've never seen her either. I don't know where she came from.
Welcome back to My Therapist is Out, an Open Space Therapy Collective podcast. Today we have our therapist with us, Terra Friedman. I'm so glad that you're here.
I'm so glad to be here.
And we are talking about open relationships, which is a great, random great timing because right before this, Kristen was with us just talking about why you need a poly-friendly therapist. So I feel like these will align really good together.
Mm-hmm. Perfect timing.
Why did you want to talk about open relationships?
I find it so fun to talk about ways to choose how you live and explore paths that aren't the really narrow path that's handed to us by society. So whether that's identity exploration or sexual orientation or romantic relationship structure, I love all of it.
Awesome. Yeah, obviously we've talked about it a bunch and it's going to be really exciting to dive a little bit more into it. To set the stage a little bit, can you help the listeners understand what open relationships are, and how that might differ from other relationship structures?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So the one caveat about open relationship, non-monogamy, is that different things mean different things to different people, the same way as it does with a lot of other topics that we cover. So it's okay if we describe something and it means something different to you. Just want to put that out there.
Great point. Yes.
Starting with what is open relationships. So even backpedaling to what is non-monogamy. So an open relationship is a kind of non-monogamy. And monogamy is, it's actually defined as one love, I believe. Monogamy.
You are the linguistic specialist, so I will
right.
trust you.
Yes. Okay. So monogamy relates to one committed partnership. And it more literally relates to like one marriage. We can think of the opposite being polygamy, which is many marriages. So there can often be confusion between polyamory, polygamy. Those are different things.
Can you say a little bit more about that? Because we'll get a lot of people coming in and saying, I love my partner very much, they're wonderful, and I'm just not being fulfilled. But I don't want to do that like sister wives thing. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about how polyamory is not that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of linguistically unfortunate that polyamory and polygamy have like sort of similar sounding words, because polygamy is a more specific practice of generally men having the ability to marry multiple women. And there's a history of those relationships not really being egalitarian, primarily because it's only the men who get to have multiple marriages. Whereas polyamory is many loves. So from amor, amor, it means multiple loves. And that can be very egalitarian depending on who's practicing and how they're practicing polyamory. There's also the assumption that monogamy is egalitarian or is more of an equal way to live than polygamy. But just like polyamory, it depends how and who is practicing that monogamy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know one of the things that you see a lot in your couples that are monogamous is a lot of power dynamics and a lot of who's in charge and who calls the shots and who's feeling like they don't have control in their lives and really balancing that out. So it's not, and I think what you're alluding to or what you're saying in general is our cultural default is monogamy is the best way and a happily ever after and let's go live this fantastic thing. But the reality of two people navigating a relationship is way more complicated. And there's, hearkening back to the episode that Jenny just did about intergenerational trauma, you're bringing in all of those power dynamics and those negative relationships that you've seen into this very one specific relationship that you're wanting to get everything fulfilled out of.
Mm-hmm. And for some people, monogamy works. Like for some people, they investigate their relationship orientation or the relationship structure they're practicing, and they find that monogamy really works for them, and that's great. There's no one right way to be in a relationship. But for people who are having that feeling of, I really love my partner and I don't want to do a sister-wife situation, but I want something different than what we have, non-monogamy as an umbrella term for the infinite ways that can look. And one of those ways that we open with is an open relationship. And so open is something that people used to refer to their relationships, meaning like sometimes they hook up with people when they're out and about, or sometimes they have other committed partners. It's a real loose definition of what open means. It mostly relates to not strictly monogamous, meaning not just one romantic and sexual partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In your experience working with clients and being in this world, when somebody's using non-monogamy or open or swinging or lifestyle or poly, are there certain themes or styles that you feel fit under the different labels, or do you feel like it's kind of fluidly used depending on the person?
I think kind of both. So I would say people who tend to describe their relationship as open tend not to have committed partnerships with more than one person at a time. Mm-hmm. That generally looks more like there are looser definitions around the types of relationships they're able to have with other people other than their primary partner, committed partner, anchor partner. All of these are terms for like an ongoing committed partnership. Mm-hmm. People who tend to use poly or polyamorous generally do have more committed partnerships, whether that looks like longer-term play partners that they are having a sexual relationship with, or longer-term romantic, even platonic partnerships, commitments that aren't like a week or a night. Things that are longer lasting, longer commitment, tend to be folks who use the term poly.
Perfect. Thank you. If somebody has a partner and is in that space of like, I think they're great, but this isn't fulfilling all of my needs. Esther Perel has a great talk on this that you can find on YouTube, I'm sure, about the pressures of modern monogamy and how we need them to be our best friend, our financial partner, helping raise family.
Confidant.
Yeah. Sexually exciting. The list goes on and on.
Perfectly expected and unexpected, all at the same time.
So if somebody's in that space and being like, this partner I have is wonderful and they meet a lot of my needs and a lot of my wants, but there's this whole other part of me that is going dormant because it can't be in this relationship. How does somebody start exploring or thinking about an open relationship or a non-monogamous relationship style, and if that would fit for them?
That is such a good question, because even having that awareness that there's two parts of them and that one part is feeling really happy, fulfilled, and loving the relationship they're in, and another part of them wants more, that is not a lot of people's starting point. For a lot of folks, at least in committed long-term partnerships living monogamously, there's a lot that happens before they even get to that point, and feeling a lot of guilt or shame or confusion or frustration about why they're not fulfilled. A lot of people will turn that onto themselves and say, like, what's wrong with me, or turn it against their partner, what's wrong with you. So it can take a lot of self-reflection and a lot of patience. Therapy can be very helpful even in that process of realizing, oh no, it's not that there's something wrong in this relationship or with me or my partner. It's actually that this script and this paradigm that we've been given isn't fitting for me, and I need something else. And that's okay to want and need other things. So a good way to start exploring that, I would say, would be to start, if you're on social media, start finding some non-monogamous people, some creators who share what their life looks like, and as many different ones as you can find, because there's as many different ways to be non-monogamous as there is to be monogamous. And you don't look at every person's relationship and say, like, I want that. That's okay. Look around and wait until you find something that you're like, oh, that's interesting to me. Maybe not exactly that, but that feels interesting. That could be something I might like. And don't put pressure on yourself to figure it all out immediately. There might be trial and error, and that's okay.
Yes. And I really like this, the way that you're talking about an entry point, is because it's pretty removed, and it's a lot of witnessing of how other people are talking about it and how other people are doing it, and really highlighting, like, finding things that fit for you or work for you, just like finding partners that fit for you and work for you. Like, you're not gonna want to date everybody just because you're thinking about including somebody else in your relationships. Let's back up a second, because I like what you said about this not being the starting point, and how the starting point usually is around blame and shame, whether towards self or partner. Can you talk a little bit more about what comes up for people when they think, like, what's wrong with me or what's wrong with you?
Yeah, so the starting point can look different depending on what is happening in the relationship. So sometimes for people it's this feeling of dissatisfaction or lack of fulfillment, and the shame around they love this relationship and they can't reconcile why then something feels off or something feels amiss. And of course, we're not talking about relationships where there's abuse happening or anything like that. We're talking about a functioning, comfortable, secure, safe relationship. And people often don't know what to do with that feeling, because if you've been told in endless ways, every movie, every song, every relationship you've ever seen is monogamous. And if you've been told that forever, that should be enough, you should be fulfilled, you should be happy, that should be what you want, there's a lot of deconstruction and a lot of courage that it takes to accept that that's not true necessarily. And so that can really shake up people's world, because that's kind of like one of the bedrocks of our society is like the nuclear family. Monogamy is the only option, and it's the only thing that we see. And so oftentimes for people, before they're able to accept that and tolerate that and sit with it, therapy is a great place to practice doing that. Shame and blame feels more accessible, and it feels like control. Like if I can hold that and say like, okay, I just need to fix this, or my partner just needs to fix that, or we just need to go out more, you know. If it can be a just needs to change X, then that feels like a lot more control, rather than deconstructing your view of relationships and realizing that what you've been given maybe wasn't even in your best interest. This template is not one size fits all.
Well said. It's so interesting how the blame, shame cycle and control really go together. And the tweak this, tweak that, change this, shift that feels safer than I need to step back and like take the egg beater and mix this whole thing up.
Yeah, if it's in here and we can control it, or if it's in between you and someone else, it's much smaller. That's like a micro. But if we're looking at like, oh no, I think all of this maybe isn't all there is, or maybe isn't right for everyone, and maybe that everyone is me. That's really big and can feel really scary to go at alone. And so that's why I keep saying like therapy is a really good place to, especially if you're working with a non-monogamy informed allied or part of the community therapist, someone who knows what that's like and can remind you that it's safe to question those things, or go onto social media, read a book about a polycouple relationship, even if it's fiction. Start to expose yourself and normalize that a little bit, so that the first place you're thinking about it isn't literally you, which can feel like more of an attack to your selfhood.
Yeah, I mean, and this goes to what we talk about constantly, is like finding that community so you're not doing this in isolation. Because there are a ton of people in non-monogamous, open, you name it, whatever relationship style.
You know someone who is in that kind of relationship, even if you don't know them.
I've got, without outing anybody, have some friends that are poly, have been poly for a long time, and are still really shy about letting people know. And it wasn't, and they didn't let their neighbor know, even though their neighbor was poly, until like 6 months after being friends with them, because it's something that they're still having some of that internal processing around of like, this bigger structure doesn't work for me. Can I step out and be vulnerable with new friends that my best friend that's coming over isn't quite my best friend?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we're seeing more as non-monogamy sort of becomes more visible and more ubiquitous, thanks to, I think, a lot of online creators and authors who are writing really openly about this topic. It's like another coming out, to come out as non-monogamous or have an alternative relationship orientation or structure. And I have had clients and friends say, who are queer or identify outside the gender binary, that they have more anxiety and feel more worried about coming out as non-monogamous than coming out as queer. And so there's, I think, similar things come into play anytime you're disclosing to someone that you don't fit neatly into the boxes that we've been given.
So taking a couple steps forward, somebody has followed some influencers, learned more about different relationship styles, has an idea of what they think might work for them or what they're looking for, is talking about it in their individual therapy. How do they start talking about it with their partner?
So an important thing to keep in mind is that as somebody is doing all of this internal work, keep in mind where your partner is going to be joining you in that. So some folks might, as soon as they have this thought, mention it to their partner and say, like, this is something I'm thinking about, and that might work fine for them. Other people might not feel safe doing that, or that might not be the road for them. And so they might be months into having talked about this in personal therapy and starting to get an idea of what they want, but their partner is going to be hearing this for the first time. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind what your partner knows and what you know. And go slowly if you're able to. Mention an article or a book or a show. There's a new, I don't want to plug it. Never mind. Toxic.
Duh. I love the, like, I'm going to plug, oh no, I don't want to be attached to that thing that pops up.
I do not. Well, representation's great, but not all representation is created equal.
Yeah. Yes, some of it is very toxic.
Quite. But mentioning something that you've seen or heard of, or even something that you were talking to a friend about, can be kind of a real dip a toe in way to introduce this idea to your partner. If it's something you've never talked about, even in the abstract, and see how that feels. See if they seem receptive. That's like step 0.5.
Perfect. Okay, we got some questions in that I'm going to read off, and we're going to pick your brain a little bit about.
Okay.
I'm thinking about going to my partner to talk about opening up a relationship, but there's a good possibility that it's going to backfire. I don't want to lose them, but I feel like I have to make a change. So if they're not ready for it, well, I guess they're going to have to deal with me. That's loaded.
There's a lot going on. Yeah. I feel curious as to how or why this person has the sense that it's likely going to backfire, and what does backfiring look like? What about their relationship history tells them that this will not go well?
It's also interesting in here that the backfire then means the person is going to have to deal with me. Like they're already going into this ready for a fight.
And ready to lay down an ultimatum. And that's a really good way to push your partner away and to make them feel very threatened. And it's tough, right? Because we're threading the needle between this non-monogamy, something that this person's interested in, they have an unmet need, they're feeling unfulfilled, and it's not fair to a partner to weaponize that and say, like, this is what I want, this is what we're doing, and if you don't like it, too bad. That's not psychological safety.
No, that's not psychological safety. It's not offering a connection. I think a lot in any relationships, you want to offer an invitation in, not a you're going to deal with this. Like that's not intimacy. And so reframing this, like you were saying before, of like, this is something I'm thinking about. I really love you and I really value our relationship, and there's more that I want from other relationships, and really reinforcing that there's nothing wrong with the partner. It's not a lack of something that the partner is or isn't doing. Yeah. Just that you're a multidimensional person, just like your partner is a multidimensional person. And can we have this conversation?
Yes, I think that you're hitting on a really important point, because there's this idea often that like non-monogamy is failed monogamy, which is not at all true. period. I don't know. It's not true. So, but with that conditioning, that's a really easy thing for a partner to think, especially if you come at it in this way of an ultimatum and really pushing away rather than, like you're saying, welcoming in. That partner's probably going to jump to the conclusion that there's something wrong. They did something wrong. I think I also hear a lot of urgency in this question. And I'm wondering if this person has been thinking about and wanting to have this conversation and to move into non-monogamy for a long time. And so kind of on the other end of what I was saying about keeping in mind where your partner's at, if it's possible to wait to the point where you have this worked out, you've decided what you want, and the urgency is built up so much that you no longer have the patience or the ability to move slowly with your partner. And at that point, I might say you might have waited too long, because now you're ready. You're so ready. You can't wait any longer. You're ready to move on no matter what your partner says. And that might be setting you up for non-monogamy without that partner.
Yeah. Multiple relationships don't mean that you have to do less in each relationship. Like, it's not a life gets easier. It's a you have to continue to do all of the emotional intimacy, communication, compromising work with your current partner and the other partners that you bring in, not less. And so you are expanding your emotional intelligence and connection and growth, and you need to keep yourself very accountable to each of these relationships in that.
Absolutely. And that's why starting that journey on your own is a lot. And that's why we both have recommended finding community, finding a therapist, having support, because you're deconstructing something that's like bedrock of society.
Okay, let's find another one in here. Okay, so I date men, and I just feel like it's hard to get guys to just agree to stuff. Like, have they never heard of mutual agreements? Let's talk about mutual agreements first and what they are in an open relationship.
So my favorite thing about talking about non-monogamy is that I get to poke at monogamy and say, like, people have this idea that only in non-monogamy do you need mutual agreements. Like, every monogamous couple has them. They just don't talk about them because a lot of them are default settings. So what we're talking about is going into the settings of relationship and seeing, like, oh, what do these look like? What do we have now? And what do we actually want them to be? So mutual agreements can look like, it can look like if you live together, you and a partner, do we let each other know that we're going to be coming home that evening or not? That could be a mutual agreement. Or how often you're getting tested for STIs and the safety protocols you're taking with other partners. Anything that is going to impact either of you in your relationship is something that probably should be talked about and agreed upon. You won't cover everything, of course. There will always be things that you run into in the moment and realize, oh, we might need an agreement here, or this is just a one-off and we can talk about it and that's fine.
Yes. You're right. A lot of monogamous mutual agreements are very default and we don't think about them. And I mean, this even goes back to what you were saying earlier, is that's part of why different monogamous relationships can look so differently, because you're going off of default of what you've seen before and just adapted those things. With open relationships, it's really helpful, I think, to define where the starting point is. Like, when you're starting into an open relationship with a longer term partner, what's okay and what's not okay. Where, like, in a monogamous relationship, what's cheating? Like, do people really talk about this? Is Is flirting cheating? Is touching somebody's shoulders cheating? Is spending one-on-one time with somebody who's not a mutual friend cheating? Is kissing? There's this list where there's often not alignment between the monogamous partners who haven't talked about it, what these things are and aren't okay. And in open relationships, and one of the things, I say this all the time, that I love about poly and open relationships is people who are in this and do this are the best communicators in the entire fucking world. And it's a work of art. And starting with this basic, okay, mutual agreements. How is time spent? How is time spent with each other? What is a emotional boundary? What is a physical boundary? And really talking through kind of those basic things and saying trying those for a little while and then coming back together and being okay, how did that feel? Do we want to try something new? Do we want to change something that didn't work? Yada, yada.
Yeah, absolutely. Much more is required if you're going back to the drawing board. And I would say that's true for monogamy or open relationships. If you're going back to the drawing board and saying I'm going to change default settings, a lot of communication is required and trust. And it will probably not always go perfectly because what you're doing is moving away from something that's kind of pre-designed to figuring out what works for you. And figuring out what works for you can be a process. And that's okay.
Yeah, you don't have to be perfect at this. That's not going to happen.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do one more question. There's one here that I think is a deeper dive into this. That is calendars. Discuss amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
Which maybe
every non-monogamous person's favorite topic is calendars.
Yeah. Which maybe we'll do a open relationship part 2 and get into the details of it. Okay, let's go. I am so tired of having fights about my other partner. Why is my partner so jealous? Should I just ditch them?
The therapist in me wants so much context.
That's the hardest part about these questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
That we have to kind of theorize and make up our own context. I'm going to mull.
Okay.
Is there anything coming up for you?
I think jealousy is something that is so taboo. If we're going into the monogamous world and everything has to look the same and be the same, jealousy is something that people have so much shame around. And then because we're not talking about it, we're not accepting it, we're not working with it, you don't know what to do with it. And so it comes out in just the worst ways that is so embarrassing for the person who is jealous, and then the person who may be being projected on or acting out against, that may not be the right word, gets really overwhelmed and doesn't know what to do with it. And so this is a feeling similar to anger, and anger is my favorite feeling, that we're just not practiced at, but is a really important and helpful informational feeling. And so getting really comfortable with jealousy isn't bad. Jealousy is a feeling and it's information, and what is it trying to tell you is right up there with communication, and something that in open relationships you got to get good at, you got to get practice at, and you have to be down to go through this path.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard there's always a lot of discussion around people saying oh, open relationship, non-monogamy, I could never. I get really jealous, as if that's a precursor. But it's just like you're saying, how do you get better at things? You do them. If monogamy is kind of set up to protect us all from any uncomfy feelings, no jealousy because this person's your only person and they're only looking at you and only thinking about you ever. In practice, that's not how it goes. And in open relationships, there can be way more transparency about jealousy and way more practice, like you're saying, of how do you sit with that and what does it mean? This question makes me wonder, I kind of want to turn this toward the person asking the question. Like, what role do you have potentially in your partner's jealousy? Do you two have mutually agreed upon ways that you're communicating or things that your other partner needs to feel safe? Are you showing up for them? And then are they keeping their agreements and giving you space when you're going out? Or are they not? Like, who and how are we respecting each other in this relationship?
Bingo. This is there's, like you're saying, there's so many different ways that this question can be coming from. And this is part of why those mutual agreements and honoring them are so important, is protecting all of your partners and all of your partner's emotional safety is your responsibility in keeping that those relationships safe. And so if the mutual agreement is, oh, I'm going to let you know when I'm unavailable and when I'm available, and then you don't, and you just, from your partner's perspective, I have ghosted them, that's on you. And so let's talk about that and what's happening.
Yeah. And if things are kind of like on paper go into plan and there's still this huge experience of jealousy, we can start to dig in therapy to, like, maybe relationship history. Maybe there are things that this is bringing up. Like, non-monogamy can bring up a lot of stuff for people.
100%.
We're talking attachment, like, immediately. And so going to work with a poly-informed therapist can be really, really helpful. Somebody who understands what it can look like when attachment things are being triggered by different relationship structures.
And even, like, self-worth and self-esteem.
Totally.
Like, if everything, everybody's respecting everybody, whatever, they trust the other person, there's all your own individual stuff that's going to come up, is like, am I worth holding this person's attention and holding this person's love? Am I always comparing myself to who else my partner is spending time with? And that often can have nothing to do with your partner and is all your own stuff that you got to work through. And
that's not to say it's that like, jealousy is nobody's fault.
No.
It's just a feeling. And I think there has also been some messaging in the poly community or non-monogamous community around, like, your feelings are your feelings and that's your that's your basket and you have to hold it. And it's a lot more complicated than that, because if you're in any kind of relationship with someone, of course you're impacting each other. And it's about being able to be vulnerable and show the partner how you're being impacted and take responsibility for some of the ways that you might be keeping up the steps in that dance too.
Well said. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and talking about this. I feel like we definitely need a deeper dive part two. Yeah. So if you have questions for Terra about how to function in a poly relationship and an open relationship, how to do that healthy, the how-tos, the strategies, the calendars, the communication, the time spent, how to spend time by yourself, and all of those things. DM us on the socials, email us at info@openspacetherapycollective.com, and we will definitely include those in the next round.
This was so fun.
Yeah. To end, tell me about a moment in the last week or two where you really felt connected to your queer community.
Okay. So I was at a restaurant eating a delicious plate of pasta, and I was not eavesdropping, but my ears picked up the two people next to me were having, like, a poly State of the Union conversation.
Nice.
State of the Union, that's like a relationship talk. And I was just, like, hearing them discuss metamors, so their partners, other partners, and sharing the things that they felt were going really well, and using I statements and being very vulnerable. And I was like, wiping a tear while I eat my pasta.
Oh, that's so cute. I love
sweet.
that. Oh, that's awesome.
Shout out to that couple. You two are
Yeah.
You're doing great.
Yeah. If you had pasta sometime,
Therapist approved.
sometime in early 2024,
Yes.
you're awesome.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much. As always, please follow, rate, review, all of those things. I know they're silly, but they do make a big impact. We appreciate you, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thanks for joining us. If you're in California and looking for a therapist, visit our website at openspacetherapycollective.com and book a free intro call with one of our therapists. If you're enjoying My Therapist Is Out, please rate, review, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. My Therapist Is Out is an Open Space Therapy Collective podcast. Our therapists are Renae Johnson, Kristen Crow, Debbie White, Jenny Nigro, Terra Friedman, Sierra Bruca, and Ernesto Martinez. Our podcast editing is done by Smash and Grab Studio and research and writing done by Matt Wade. We'd love to hear from you about today's topic, so email us at info@openspacetherapycollective.com. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Open Space Therapy Collective. Thanks for listening.